Graham, would you just let us know the name of the farm and what you do here?
So I'm Graham Love. This is a family business.
Yeah.
We advertise on the surname Love. It's the fruit of love. And we grow diverse fruits, seasonal fruits for local people. The farm's been running since 1950.
Wow.
So I started when I was 1 year old.
Yeah. Yeah. And the name of the farm?
It's called Greenways Fruit Farm. We're in the village of Hurstmonceux in East Sussex. There's not many farms around here that are as productive as this one now.
Mm.
There's one big dairy farm, has about 1,500 cows here, and he's silaging, getting the food for the winter now in May. It's him and me, and I don't think there's many other people farming it now anymore.
Wow.
We just use the land for building houses on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's where the money is, isn't it? Yeah. I'd just like to find out a bit about you, your life, what makes you who you are, because I think it's important to see what you do. But I want to try and build relationship, even if it's via a screen, or when people come, if they watch it and come and see you at a farmer's market or something, they can understand more of the person as opposed to just someone that sells them some fruit. You're English, you were born in England?
Yes, I was born a year before my parents bought this land and turned it into a fruit farm. And they worked hard through the 1950s, clearing the hedges, levelling the land, and planting trees. And in those days, the trees would take 6 or 7 years to establish before you really started cropping them. So they grew Brussels sprouts, peas, potatoes, other things that they could sell locally while the trees were coming in production. And then we got it to production, and then my father was pondering whether to build cold stores here and a pack house to pack his own fruit. And he was invited by a big cooperative in North Kent who were looking for outlying farms in case the farms in the North Kent area had a hailstorm or frost. To spread the risk of the cooperative, they wanted outlying farms, so they would always have fruit in a difficult year, more likely.
Yeah.
So we took that opportunity. So we never spent money here. We spent the money supporting the cooperative instead. And that worked very well for 20, 30, till about the mid-90s, when the full impact of the European Union had started to happen. And there was a lot more imported fruit. The whole marketplace for fruit got more competitive. In the 1950s, of course, there was quite shortages because after the war and no investment in farming. So in the early years, that was good. So that got very difficult in the 90s. Mm. And at that point, our cooperative went bankrupt. So then I was on my own again. It's like, what am I going to do? And I did think about selling. It's like, I don't want to be a fruit grower all my life. There's more to life than being a fruit grower. But because everybody, it was in the doldrums, the money you could get for your property, your fruit farm was very low because nobody wanted to do it. So it was a very bad time to sell.
Yeah.
So fortunately, although I tried to sell, I could only get the price of a council house in Brighton.
Yeah.
So it wasn't viable, really. So then I at that point, I'd got rid of all my permanent staff, made them redundant. And then I suddenly thought, look, there's within 30 miles of the farm, there's 2 million people. They all need food.
Yeah.
How come I can't make a living?
Yeah.
You know? So then I just said, I'll just do what I can do for myself in a small scale. And then we slowly brought the farm back as, you know, at the same time, farmers market, because a lot of farmers were having a job to find a way of making a living on world market prices. So farmers market started up. And I went to Lewis with a Land Rover load of apples. And there was such a demand. And me and the girlfriend was with us. We just sold out. I thought, wow, I could make a living selling fruit. Mm. It was so popular, just bags of apples for £1 sort of thing.
Yeah.
So then we started to go in a new direction of you know, diversifying and producing whatever we could sell locally.
Yeah.
And that has been our focus since then.
So what, you grew up on the farm when your parents had it? So you always were sort of working on it as well? And
Yeah, my father was so focused on the farm. The family came second, although now in hindsight, I see what he did for us all.
yeah,
But I have three brothers. They had more confidence, self-confidence than I had at the time.
yeah,
So they left, we don't want anything to do with this. It's too much like hard work for very little money. And I stayed with my father because it seemed the safest way. I spent 3 years at college, horticulture college, and then I went on voluntary service overseas, and I worked on a fruit farm in Holland, did all that sort of stuff, and then came back here reluctantly. I actually, a girlfriend, I'd met at the Isle of Wight festival. No, before the Isle of Wight, just before I was going to Africa to work, and she got pregnant at the Isle of Wight festival. So my time on voluntary service was cut short. And instead of spending 2 years abroad and then another year traveling the world and not coming back to this place, because, I was busy trying to find myself, I came back and started working. And then in those early years, we had to get a house. So I was working for my father in the day. In the evenings, I was running a youth club 2 nights a week. And 3 nights a week, I was working at Hellingly Hospital as a porter, as a cleaner, to supplement my income. I had three. And that's how it went on. And then my father got into the early 80s and he was ready to retire. And I said, okay, Dad, let's sell up. You want to go? I don't want this bloody place, Again, the problem of selling it. And I had a French wife by then. There's been a very big drama between me and my father. And we were kind of rivals. We were trying to prove to each other that we were better than the other. So it worked very well. The business was very successful in a way because I couldn't, but not for my family life or the emotional life. And so I feel, in my wisdom now, I feel really guilty about the way I did work with her because she tried so hard.
Yeah.
We're still good friends.
Yeah, that's good.
But we are, we live separate lives.
Yeah.
So then when she left and I was on, and it was like, well, let's sell, but I couldn't sell. And then, of course, we started to have workers from Eastern Europe was coming over in the 90s. And so suddenly there was a supply of labour and, that worked for, and Arthur stayed. One of the other women who came to work here from Poland, he fell in love with, and so they married. They have 2 kids. And now just last year, I transferred the whole property over to him. So he's the owner of the property now. Right. I'm just the sad old man. And but mainly because of death duties. So that the business will continue even when as long he's got to keep me alive for 7 years. Or if I die earlier, he'll put me in the freezer and keep me so he won't tell anybody. It's just, practical, that is really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I see that I don't believe that anybody owns anything on this planet. It's an arrangement that human beings have in order to run things. But I'm just a custodian of this place, really. It's been given to me in trust. And I saw how, I guess part of me seeing how hard my father worked to build it up, I couldn't just let it go. I had to give some effort to it.
Yeah.
And his belief, Graham will never do it as well as I did it. But, I can't do it anymore. I'm getting too old, so he'll have to do it. And now my feeling is, Arthur will never do it as well as me, because, he's different to me. He won't do it as well. But he's doing really well.
Which is great. Do you think that feeling of what your father had in terms of, Graham won't do it as well as me, and you thinking that same way, does that come from a place of insecurity and
ego?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know all the mistakes I've made and things that I could have done differently and they would have been better.
Yeah.
And he's much more detached. He will get staff in to do things. Whereas I want to control it all out of my insecurity.
And I suppose a good thing for Arthur is that he's got all your experience as he works with you, and he's been with you for how long did you say? 17 years.
17 years, I think.
So he's gleaning everything from you as well as then putting his own stamp on it.
He's been off on training courses and stuff as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But of course, you know, I've got 50 odd years of experience at this place, and it's very hard to transform that onto the next generation. They'll do it differently. You know, they will see it differently and do it differently.
Yeah.
And you've got to make space for them to do that.
Yeah.
To make the mistakes if they make mistakes. But yeah, we work quite well together. I think I had a heart attack after having my 4th COVID jab in October, and 3 weeks later I had a bit of a heart attack, right, with hospital and stuff. I think it's more palpitations caused by the anxiety I've always felt when I wake up in the morning.
Yeah.
You know, there's a core feeling from childhood of anxiousness.
Yeah. And
I think eventually the heart, that's part of the why my heart is beginning to play up a bit.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a scare for him. He said, "Oh my God, I might lose you." And it's like, no, you've got to stay alive for another 6 years.
Why do you think you have anxiety from childhood? Just things that happened in your life or how you grew up? Or?
Yeah, I was the shyest one in the family. I was the 3rd. My parents were really struggling to build the farm up, and Graham came along. And because the 3rd, I was meant to be a girl. My mother was really praying for a little girl. And I was meant to be the girl, and it's another boy. Jesus has given me a boy. I will love him anyway. But and then when they moved here, they went away, had a bit of a holiday before they started this project. And my 2 elder brothers were brought back to them within 3 or 4 weeks. They had their holiday, and then they had him. But I was too young, so I was left with a relative.
Right.
For 6 months. And I can see now that this was done when I was about 6 months old.
Yeah.
When I was just getting used to the voices and the smells and the tastes of my parents. And suddenly, for no reason, I was given to some stranger to be looked after. Mm-hmm. And I now understand with adoption and stuff that 6 months to 2 years is quite a difficult. You either do it really early.
Yeah.
And I think that affected me.
That affected you
in some way.
Yeah.
But it meant that I stayed here and was a fruit grower, which was my contribution to life on this planet, you know. So it wasn't all bad, but it felt like bad.
Yeah.
And
but it still
and I was terribly shy all through my and I was a bedwetter until my early 20s, I think, or 1920. You know. And that hung me up terribly because you felt you couldn't go and have a night out with your friends. Yeah. You know, go camping with the scouts and waking up in the morning with a wet bed.
Yeah.
Very embarrassing.
I think there's a lot of people that suffer with things like that, but no one ever wants to talk about it because it's embarrassing and shameful. And I think, you know, even...
Well, that's what I never did.
Exactly.
So the communication with my wife was never good. It was all pretense, the male front, rather than being real. I didn't know how to be real.
No.
It took me going away on courses and stuff.
Yeah, I suppose when your dad's focused on farming and working and not from a place of neglect, that's how he did things.
Yeah.
Rubbed off on you as you...
And again, he couldn't be an emotional, caring father.
Yeah.
Because he didn't know how to do that. He'd come out of the war when everybody had to be soldiers and, you know...
Goodness knows what he experienced,
Yeah, it was just tough, hard work. And nobody knew whether they get bombed and die. This is still going on in the world now.
Yeah.
I thought that would all be over by now. I thought we'd done all that in the last century.
Have you ever thought about counselling or getting that done that? You found that helpful? Have you found that helpful? Or didn't work for you?
My parents were Baptists. We're from the strict Baptist line. And so I was trying to be a good Christian boy with all this stuff. Then I fortunately got into some LSD and dope. And suddenly I could see, instead of the Baptist philosophy was after you die, if with a bit of luck, you'll go to paradise, which was an understanding in those days because life was so hard for slaves and people. The hope was that after you die, life would get better.
Yeah.
And then I took some LSD and, you know, had a experience of paradise in this lifetime. And then also an experience of hell in this lifetime. You could see the power of the mind between heaven and hell, the total joy or total depression. And I thought, well, is that the only way? Through drugs, you know? And I had another blissful experience, but I've been knocking myself out roller skating. And I knocked myself out and I went into this blissful place. And then I was working in East Anglia on the fruit farm in the winter. Mm-hmm. And it was so cold and I hate, you know, it's like, I have to do this. I've got to be a fruit grower, you know, there was no pleasure. And I remember the depression I felt after coming back. Is this it? Being a fruit, you know? It's the only way I can be blissed out is to bang my head against the wall. So all these signs were happening. And then I heard about an Indian teacher who came, who said, I can show you how that place inside where you're just at peace, where you know, where everything's always all right, you know, which we said earlier. I will not abandon you. No matter how bad things get in your life, there is still that place inside of peace and calm and joy. And it was like, okay, so we can do it in this lifetime. I don't have to wait till I'm dead. And that was, you know. But, you know, for my parents, it was like, we'll live a good life this life. And then when we pass away, we'll get our reward in heaven. Well, the Indian teacher says, no, heaven is continuous, constant. You can either be in a state of being in heaven at this moment, or you can be out of it and just like worried about the bills. So there was a big change. There was a kind of a separation from, because my brothers also got into this Indian teacher. Mm-hmm. And of course that threatened my parents and their way of being. Yeah. So it caused a separation in the family. My father always had a Thanksgiving service in that barn. We used to have, you know, 300 or 400 people would turn up. He did it really well. Yeah. Giving thanks for the harvest, because it's a miracle that we have food. The harvest comes around every year, and we have food for the winter. Yeah. You know, look at just what happened recently. That there was no tomatoes or no red peppers in February. It's like, what's going on in the world? So yeah, that was a lovely time. I think one of the advantages of being brought up with a Christian background was that it gave me the work ethic. Yeah. It's good to work hard for the benefit of the community. Yeah. So that's the basic fundamental reason to get up in the morning and do things, because I'm alive, because I'm a human being, and recognizing the gift of existence, I want to give something back in whatever way I can. Yeah. You know, because life has given me so much, you know. Society has given me an education, provides me with electricity, provides me with water. You know, I've got to give something of myself back to the society. And also, I need to make money. I've got bills. It's like, you know, it's a competitive world. You've got to keep working hard. You know, you've got to keep making an effort. Yeah. And
that's your philosophy you've carried throughout your life?
I also see that the grace comes, the rewards come because of the effort you make. If you don't make any effort, you don't get any rewards. So making the effort is part of the deal, as far as I can see. Yeah. For many years, I was very, very doing it because of duty. My family's expectation. My father had 4 sons. He wanted one to take on the business. It would break his heart if none of us do it. So I'll do it, and I put the weight of the farm on my shoulders, and you know, I'm going to be a warrior growing farm. And then doing, you know, counselling and doing some work, I saw I had an opportunity. I thought I'm probably in the top 10% most fortunate people in the world, having a piece of land in southeast England, and then to have every day being different, you know. Every season is different. This year is different to last year. Yeah. Never to you. The challenge, the variety. not having to commute, to be able to stay where you live and work rather than have to go somewhere else every day to work. All of these things became an advantage, a wonderful life. I'm so fortunate, so blessed. So when you feel fortunate, you want to make your best effort.
Yeah.
It's only when we feel the whole world's against you, it's like you feel like, well, why should I bother? You know.
And that mindset.
And growing food for people. And having done farmers markets now, then you get this little old lady comes and buys her 3 or 4 apples off you. And it's like, oh, you know, there's that connection is made between that person. When it was supplying the supermarket, it's like just the price. The quality is never quite as good as they want it to be. They want a lower price. There's never any compliments in a way. It's like, you could do better. You know, there's constant criticism.
Try harder.
Yeah. And of course you are going to try harder. So I guess that's, I've been really fortunate. I'm really blessed in this lifetime compared to those Rohingya Muslims in Cox's Bazar, is it, in, you know, that have had a cyclone go through their camp, you know, and no money and just surviving on United Nations food. It's like life can be so tough for human beings. And we've had, you know, thanks to the work ethic that the English had in the past, we've built this wonderful society. You know that cathedral that the king got crowned in. I mean, that was built by human beings with wooden scaffolding and no JCBs and nothing. That, you know, just doing incredible things human beings have built.
That's true.
I don't like being a tourist anymore because it's looking at what other people have done. It's like, what am I doing? I'm on the planet. What am I giving back to life? You know, it's inspiring looking at other people's works of art and stuff. It's like, wow, what did they do to do this? What am I doing?
Yeah.
You know, it's like I'm just as much a human being now as 2,000 years ago. And we always look back at the people of the past and all this. But we can make this world wonderful. We don't have to do wars anymore. We're all one human race. We're slowly learning that. Slowly. Much slower than I thought. I thought after Vietnam we would start, but we still seem to want to
take our time.
Well, yes, there's so much money to be made in making armaments.
Yeah. So you had Arthur and some different workers coming and working here, and the 2 Polish ladies that we walked past. So that's how did that happen? How did you get people to come and work here? Was it by accident, or did it just happen, or did you look for that?
Back in the 1960s, we had my father employed housewives who didn't want a full-time job, but to have a part-time job, and they come in the winter and prune the trees. And we always had local housewives who would come apple picking, and they used to love it because they'd had a row with their husband in the morning, and they can come out here and pick apples and forget about their kids, you know, and the problems they got with the kids and all that sort of stuff. It was like therapy for them. And you pay us as well.
Yeah.
And then once the Eastern Europe opened up to the Westerners, they were looking to build their economies. There was more opportunity for work here than there. So the young people would come from universities, originally from universities, to work for the holiday season in the West, to have enough money to pay for their education for the coming year.
Yeah.
So that's how it started. And then some of them stayed because they could see they could have a better life here than back home in Eastern Europe. And that developed, and there was agencies that would develop where they could apply to the agency and the agency would find work for them in England. So we'd get our staff from agencies.
Yeah.
They're still around, but because Arthur's Polish, he's got family connections and his wife's got family connections. So we get a lot of our staff
through
networking, really.
Yeah.
And some, you know, who come here several years running.
Yeah.
And so they know what it's like here. So they'll come here. They know they can earn £1,000 in a few weeks, which will help them for the coming year.
Yeah.
It's kind of been organic. There's no real organisation.
Yeah.
We're now trying again to get more local people to work as
Mhm.
well. I meet them at farmers markets
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But the problem is to live in southeast England, you need to earn what, minimum 18,000 to 20,000 pounds a year to pay for the rent and all the cost of living. But agriculture cannot afford to pay 20,000 a year. So most farmers have ended up with caravans and accommodation and having people from Eastern European to work.
Yeah.
Because we want the system wants cheap food,
Mhm.
because so many people are pensioners or on welfare. So if the price of food goes up, taxation is going to have to go up to give more money to the pensioners and people on welfare. So it's priority to have cheap food in our society. So therefore, you've got to find ways of, if we couldn't provide cheap food, if we have to pay the workers 20,000 a year, it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
So you have to find another way of doing it. And that's why Eastern Europeans, and many Eastern Europeans have come, they started working on the farms and they realise it's low pay relative to other jobs. So they've moved into managers of other businesses and become like Arthur, he's now a manager, not just a worker. And that's how it is. And the farming, the English farming community is getting older, i.e. me, but the new generation is, a lot of them are Romanians working in all the farms, and Eastern Europeans who found there's a better life doing this over here, back home.
Yeah. Interesting.
Farming's gone into two directions. There's been a lot of people who've made a lot of money out of the city, either selling land for building and stuff like that, and they got such a lot of money and they rolled it over onto a farm and planted fruit trees in order not to pay tax, capital gain. So there's these very big enterprises with managers, and then there's small people like me who see this niche of growing food for local people. We have a stall outside on the road and selling asparagus and rhubarb, and they just come and put their money in and you get a nice little income. Also understanding that we have to have food, and nobody in the world knows how good the harvest is going to be this coming year. It could be a disaster. We might have gales, forest fires, hailstorms, could be, hopefully not. So, and the food only goes from one year to the next. We have to keep producing it.
Yeah, true.
Up until now, with the warming temperatures and more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, plants are doing phenomenally well because they live on carbon dioxide, and us human race we're really good at producing it. But how long they see with rice, you can only, it plateaus. Eventually there's more CO2 than the plant needs and they don't improve anymore. But also it's the climate change that goes with it. The rainstorms are getting heavier, but more infrequent. It's so, the climate, the atmosphere is more turbulent. We don't know how it's going to go. But at the same time, the world population is still increasing. They think about 9 billion of us and we're all going to have food. And more people are in cities not knowing how to grow food. When I was young, everybody knew a farmer. Everybody in their summer holidays would go pick hops or something in Kent. Everybody was involved in the farming industry one way or another.
So the benefits of people planting a fruit tree in their garden and growing for themselves a little bit. So Graham, what can the everyday person do to support local businesses like yours and others in the local community?
Well, if you buy your food locally, that would be the biggest support. If we know we have a market for what we produce.
Yeah.
The thing is, with like most crops, it all comes at once. And you know, people only want so much food every day. So it's being able to store it and keep it so we can, you know, run it for as many months as possible. But we are all in it together, all us human beings. You know, I need doctors and nurses. Arthur's children need teachers. The teachers need people to grow their food for them. We are all linked together. It's that recognition that if it's just what's in it for me, we should be looking after all groups, that nobody should need to strike because the society is taking care of everybody. I guess I'm more socialist than I am capitalist, actually, in my outlook. We're all in it together, and we need to work together.
Yeah,
it's a family of human beings.
So you said you got people could come to the farm and buy stuff directly from the front, or
I don't have a farm shop. I think
really,
ecologically, it's more sensible for me to put a big load of food on my van and take it into a town centre, and where people can come, than having lots of people driving out of town just to buy a few kilos of apples.
Yeah.
We've tried pick your own, but it doesn't work for us. It takes a lot of organising. So
you'd encourage people to get to their local farmers markets and local growers markets.
And support the greengrocers and the local businesses, all of them. It will, I think, as energy goes up and we can't move stuff around like we do. At the moment, my apples go to be stored in Horsman Den, they're packed there, then they're sent off to a distribution centre for Tesco's or Waitrose, and then they're taken out, lorry loads of produce come out. Because energy's been so cheap, we can move products all over the world very cheaply, have been.
Yeah.
It may be that energy becomes more and more expensive like it used to be, and then naturally things will localise again.
Yeah.
And it's already happening. You know, a lot of shopkeepers come direct to me or the local market to buy local produce. But there's not many of us left. That's the problem. That system really has disintegrated in the last 20 years. There were so many fruit farms in Sussex when I in the 50s and 60s. And now.
And what would your advice be to anyone that wants to get into fruit farming? One bit of advice that you would give them. It's probably lots, but
go and see your rich uncle who's made millions of pounds in the city, and tell him, "Uncle, I want to have a fruit farm. Please, I will need £500,000 plus of investment to do it." I mean, land prices, because we've made this rod for our back. We've put the price of houses up, the price of land. Once you've built a house, it's free. You paid the builders off, you paid the people putting the roof on and the electricians to put the electricity in. The house could be free, it's been paid for. But instead, our system makes the house more and more and more expensive. The house doesn't work, it's the same house.
Yeah.
So we've made it very difficult. That's why food has to be cheap, because we're paying ridiculous amounts of money just to have somewhere to sleep.
Very brilliant. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.